maybe it looks, it's new for us, but maybe it has to do something with the REM sleep. The only thing, because that has to do with moving eyes or something.
Right.
Must be REM sleep. And then from then on, she started, hey, REM sleep is also moving eyes. But there was actually, and there was a theory, but it was never validated. There was no scientific support. And for everything you find, you can say it's a working memory taxing task.
Ad de Jongh, welcome to the Art and Science of EMDR, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to be there.
Yeah, so we are talking about EMDR 2.0 today. So I wanted to start by asking you, what is EMDR 2.0 and how is it different from the traditional EMDR that most of us learned in our basic EMDR training?
Yeah, most of it, of what I'm going to present is on the working memory theory, not so much on EMDR 2.0, but 2.0, 2.0 is, it's based on the working memory theory. You can see the working memory, you can see the working memory theory as an operating system.
Yes.
So a new operating system, like you have your iPhone, you say, hey, I update with a new system, and that means that everything works on the working memory theory. So EMDR 2.0 is based on the principle of motivation, asking the patient to be more a co-patient, a co-therapist, I mean. It's also initiating the memory. So it's a way of activating the memory in a more sensible way or a more active way than you normally do with EMDR. Just asking to pay attention to a picture. No, you say, hey, and you don't have to tell me the story or so, but yes, let's add some stimuli. For instance, the sound of a dog when you are bitten by a dog, and that's part of the trauma. So you're more busy with activating the memory. So it's when the memory is activated in the working memory, you can tax it. And taxation is also not only the slow eye movements, but all kinds of things that you think it's taxing the working memory. Yeah? And that can be all kind of things. So I'm going to talk about the working memory theory with all these concepts in it, and then but the therapy is something different. Then you have the protocol. The protocol is more the standard protocol, so it's not different. But these parts, the motivation at the beginning, for instance, I would say to the patient, say, hey, you are going to think about the memory as much as you can. I am going to distract you as much as I can and see what happens. I think, let's see who wins. I think I win. So then you ask the patient not only to be passive, but you are really ask the patient to really keep that memory as much as possible, fully activated in the working memory. So, and then that's the prediction of the working memory theory, that if a memory is in the working memory, it's fully activated, and you tax it to a maximum, not only a little bit, but to the maximum, then EMDR works much better than, that's the prediction. It works much better than the regular EMDR standard. But we're doing an RCT of this in this moment, in which we compare EMDR traditional form with EMDR 2.0 and the Flash in a 3-arm randomized clinical trial at this moment. So, but we already did some studies and showing that that EMDR 2.0 has something to offer to patients, but also to therapists. And it's a lighter form. It's much more fun. People as a therapist, you have much more fun and you have much more variation. Also, the patient has much more variation. But this was not so much about EMDR 2.0. I'm going to talk about the working memory theory.
Yeah, so I think we're ready for your PowerPoint, but and you can start your PowerPoint. But I wanted to ask you before that, I learned in my basic EMDR training about the interhemispheric hypothesis or the REM hypothesis. What are your thoughts about these theories?
No evidence at all. Zero evidence. But it is a theory. But yeah, we still need evidence. It was Francine Shapiro discovered EMDR, and I know I talked a lot with her. We were good friends, and we had almost daily contact. We talked a lot about that, and I said, okay, why not? Francine Shapiro started with something, and I also spoke with the reviewers of her first publication, and they asked her, hey, explain me, you had a walk through the park and something happened. Explain me how you think EMDR works. And he said, yeah, I don't know, but she went to some neurobiologists, and they say, yeah, maybe it's new for us, but maybe it has to do something with the REM sleep. The only thing, because that has to do with moving eyes or something.
Right.
Must be REM sleep. And then from then on, she started, hey, REM sleep is also moving eyes. But there was a theory, but it was never validated. There was no scientific support. And for everything you find, you can say it's a working memory taxing task you're doing. You say, hey, bilateral stimulation works. Yeah, but it's because it's a taxing task. And interesting, and then I'm going to talk about that. For instance, what also works very well is counting, or doing calculations, like 1,000 minus 7 or something works. Taxing task has nothing to do with hemispheres or something. Spelling task. How can a spelling task work? Hey, what has that to do with two brains? Nothing. So Francine Shapiro knew already that there was no support, but she didn't want to change her ideas. And I said to her, if you have so much competition with the cognitive behavioral field, why don't you start with a theory and change your ideas about it? And say, hey, cognitive therapy cognitive science there's so much support for the working memory theory. Why not embrace all these cognitive behavioral therapists and say, in laboratory, you can see that the working memory theory holds in any case. We tested it many times with many PhD students. They all were they all wanted to find out whether the working memory theory holds, whether it could be validated or not, or falsified. They tried to falsify it with all kinds of tasks, but already in 2008, there was a publication, Gunther and Botner, one of the most important publications on EMDR, but Francine Shapiro didn't want to mention that publication. But it clearly shows if you do this or this,
same effect.
Same effect. So the whole idea about two brains, bilateral, it didn't fit at that time, 2008. And that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's already there. But the working memory theory was also already there. In 2000, and in 1974, it was discovered. It was it started with the theory and all the research. 1974, Francine Shapiro took a walk in the park in 1989, 15 years later. But she was not aware of the theory. Otherwise, she could have said, hey, in her first paper, has nothing to do with neurobiology. Oh yeah, it has to do with neurobiology, but you can better explain it by a very research that's already there. You don't have to.
Maybe the REM theory is more sexy. I don't know. We talked with Robert Stickgold, who is the neuroscientist that Francine talked in the beginning when she found out, and he wrote an article about it. But for those who don't know you and your background, I just have to say that you published so many studies. I just looked. I reviewed some of them, but I looked at the list, and I don't know anyone in the EMDR world who published so many studies. So I just want to, for people who don't know you, to know that everything you talk about is based on a lot of research.
Yeah, so published 500 articles, most on EMDR, but yeah, a lot of studies. And today we had 2 new studies published. So there is a lot to do with many randomized clinical trials. We do a lot. I think 50% of all the research in the world on EMDR is coming from the Netherlands. Not only from me, but from the Netherlands. So yes, we do. We have almost 7,000 members, and EMDR is a small country, but it's a guideline treatment, and now we started a clinic on borderline personality disorders. We have a large clinic, the largest PTSD clinic in the world. It's in the Netherlands. With we already treated 9,000 complex PTSD patients, so we have a lot of data. But we now started a borderline clinic, and the borderline clinic is only 6 days. We now know our complex PTSD treatments are 4 days now, 4 days in a row, with 4 sessions in a day.
And that's in an inpatient setting, right?
Not anymore. It was. It used to be. Not anymore. Now people stay one night. So they start at Monday. Then the next they stay in the clinic for Monday until Tuesday. Then they go home and they start the next Monday and Tuesday online. So it is 4 days with one night and intense and face-to-face at the clinic, and then 2 days at home in remote. Yeah. So that's a 4-day treatment with 80% loss of diagnosis and 90% loss of diagnosis for complex PTSD, because it's easier to get rid of complex PTSD because of you need to have more symptoms. And if you lose some symptoms, you lose your diagnosis. So it's remarkable that we have so much success, but it's all EMDR 2.0 that we use. Yeah.
Okay, so Ad, when you're ready, we're ready to look at your PowerPoint.
Yes. Yes, so this presentation is from myself as a professor in anxiety disorders, and Sander. And Sander will present himself later on, I think. Let's start. So I already said the theory that has most scientific support, many studies, many PhD students did their projects with this theory. And it's therefore, because there is so much evidence, it's a suitable explanation for the effects of EMDR therapy. And it was established in 1974, the theory, and since then there was a lot of research, and that was carried out by Alan Baddeley. And Alan Baddeley is a cognitive behavioral scientist from the university in Leeds or Cork, at least in the UK. And I have a short video clip of him explaining his theory.
The term working memory is based on a simple idea that complex thought processes depend on a single system that operates across a wide range of situations. For example, mental arithmetic, multiplying 22 by 7, for example, giving directions to your house to a friend, or working out what the best way of choosing a new vacuum cleaner might be. All of these are assumed to depend on this common system. It's a concept that's currently used very widely with thousands of references per year. If you assume that you have a limited short-term store and you gradually fill it up, then the more it's filled, the less should be left for performing other tasks. So we gave our subjects a series of tasks that we assumed would depend on working memory and had them perform these at the same time as they were remembering 1, 2, anything up to 6 digits, a 6-figure telephone number. This shows the results of one of our experiments in which our students attempted to solve very simple reasoning questions while holding anything from 0 to 8 digits. As you can see, on the vertical y-axis, there is how long it took to solve each problem. Along the bottom axis is the number of digits they were holding, and as you can see, it took longer the heavier the digit load.
So he is talking about a competition between two tasks. So keeping the memory in your working memory, and at the same time asking to perform eye movements. So by watching the therapist moving his eyes. So one task is keeping the memory inside your head, and the other task is trying to track the fingers of the therapist. So you can say in the long-term memory, let's say you're being bitten by a dog, and the patient comes in and you ask him, hey, there was something with a dog. Can you tell me the story about the dog who attacked you? Then the memory has to come out of the long-term memory, the neocortex. And people need to retrieve that memory, so it's going into the short-term memory. You can say the short-term memory is something like the working memory. So it's somewhere in the brain, what we call the working memory. And we know that the working memory, and if a memory is in the working memory, it's labile. It can be changed. So that's what you do. You ask to retrieve the memory, you ask the patient to keep it in the short-term memory, and then you tax the working memory. So there's a competition between these two, and it's difficult to perform two tasks at the same time. So you're moving your fingers, and the patient pulls attention to the task of the fingers of the therapist. So that's the experiment. And then the memory is reconsolidated because the patient, I can't remember, and I don't know what comes up now because I was distracted so much. Okay, the memory is going back in the in the long-term memory. And when you go back to targets, you ask the patient, hey, that memory of the dog, how is it stored in your head right now? Bring it up. And the patient say, okay, let's bring it up here. And the patient say, okay, yes, I had it was disturbing on a scale from 0 to 10, 7 or something. But now, when you did this strange task, it's 4 or 3. And then I ask the patient, hey, just concentrate on what makes it a 3 or 4. And then you have the same competition again between these two tasks, and we do the trick all the time. So you do this trick all the time when you do EMDR. It's a very interesting conceptualization of what's happening with EMDR, and not too fancy with all things that happening in the neurobiology of the brain and its cells. It's also an explanation that many patients lack. So if the working memory, I've already talked about this, the working memory theory is a valid explanation for the effects of EMDR therapy. If that's true, then the speed of the eye movements would matter. If that's true, yes. And that's true. So slow eye movement has a very bad effect on the memory. Oh, okay, you can do it, but then it takes a long time. Most of the time, this afternoon, I had a supervision session with my therapist in one of the trials, and she did it very slowly and said, okay, how long did it take to get a cert 0? And when I watched the video, I said, okay, took me an hour. I said, okay, if you do it quicker, you can do 2 or 3 memories in an hour. And that's what we do in our new randomized clinical trial in which we treat personality disorders. We have an average of 4 to 5 memories in an hour. And it all has to do with the fact that if you tax more and use a smaller and a quicker speed, then you have better effects. And here you can see it, slow eye movements as a slow effect. Fast eye movements have a better effect. At the y-axis, you see a mean change, and it means mean change, and you see, hey, that's the effect of your therapy. Speed matters, and this is a publication of Suzanne van Veen. She is one of the PhD students in the Netherlands, and she did a number of experiments. They're all published. And you see here that the more you tax, the more and the better effects of, and this is the EMDR, the difference score. That means the pre-post difference score. So yes, speed does it. Do eye movements have to go from left to right? Yeah, that's a prediction of the interhemispheric hypothesis, also a prediction of the REM sleep. But is it necessary? No, it's not. Gunther and Botner, I already said it, in 2008 did a beautiful publication in Behavior Research and Therapy, which is a very good journal. And this group from Canada proved that horizontal eye movements and the vertical eye movements has no difference. And you really see that vertical eye movements really has a trend of a better effect. This is what you see here is the mean difference. So here you see a better effect in the bars when you do the vertical eye movements, but it's not significant. So you can say that, but you see a trend. So there's no difference in performing the eye movements horizontally compared to when performed vertically. So these results disprove the notion that bilaterality, BLS, is essential in degrading memories. In its performing eye movements, then the only task that works. No, it's not, because in that same publication in 2008, it's a very important publication, not only horizontal or vertical eye movements, but also auditory tasks, drawing tasks. So making a drawing on paper while holding a memory in mind were capable of decreasing vividness, emotionality, and completeness of disturbing memories relative to an eye stationary control. So it was a randomized control laboratory study. And this, what I already said, counting and calculating is nothing bilateral in this. And here you see a very simple experiment in which you do, hey, let's do a simple calculation task, 450 minus 2 in the laboratory. And you do a task of 450 minus 7, which is more difficult task. So the prediction is if you do a more difficult task, then the effects must be better. And here the effects was a significant effect on emotionality, so of the memory. So the working memory theory has a strong scientific support. There are all kinds of reviews that show that effect. This is a rather recent article asked here an overview. And I can send that to you. Is there a neurobiological correlate? Of course, everything is happening in the brain, but I like the studies of Lucia de Voogd. She had a large laboratory, and she did all kinds of experiments. And eye movements, as used in EMDR therapy, can enhance extinction through amygdala suppression. So he said, if you do eye movements, there is a correlate in the brain, and it means as soon as you do that, and you can see that in scans, then you see that the amygdala is suppressed, is inactive. So when you do eye movement, the amygdala is suppressed, and that means that there is, which alters retention of emotional memories that are central in conditions like PTSD. She said in another experiment she did, she said, if you suppress the memory, and it's a more or less a linear curve. Any demanding task, she said, is cognitively demanding, may a suitable intervention, and it's more a linear curve. The more you tax, the more extinction you see, the more the amygdala is suppressed, and the more extinction you see. So here's what she said: in a load-dependent fashion. This means memory taxation, memory load, more memory loads, more suppression of the amygdala, and more effects on the memory. So yes, again, the more the working memory is taxed, the stronger the amygdala is deactivated, and as a result of which disturbing memories are reconsolidated in a less emotional form. Yes, we see EMDR's reconsolidation therapy. You transform the memories in an other form, a less disturbing form, and of course the brain is involved in this, and the amygdala has a very important role in attaching more adrenaline to the memory. So, and now it's deactivated and less reconsolidated in a less emotional form. So that's it. Yeah. So here you see an example of applying a relatively low form of working memory. And you can say it in other terms, it's a limited dual attention task. And you can say, yeah, has a predictable or reduced positive effect on the desensitization of what we call it in the laboratory degrading of the memory, and thus on the effect of the therapy. And that's true for both phases, at least in the desensitization phase and installation phase, are more or less similar processes. With different dependent variables. The one is you need a SUT to measure effect, and the other phase, the installation phase, you use a VOC to see what's the effect on the memory. It's very likely that a high working memory load will have an equally positive effect on the therapeutic process in both phases. And of course, what we like, it's so easy to understand, not that funny story about, hey, you have two parts in your brain when there is no evidence for this. You can say there is a lot of evidence for the working memory theory, and if you explain it to patients, they can understand very well.
If you have experienced something horrible and have developed psychological symptoms such as flashbacks, fears, sadness, or sleep problems, you may well be helped by EMDR, a proven and effective therapy. Suppose you have been confronted with a violent crime, an accident, you have been bitten by a dog, or you have had to deal with sexual abuse or violence at home. Such a powerful experience is stored into your brain with a lot of emotions. Once such a memory is stored in your long-term memory, it can bother you for quite a long time. The disturbing memory keeps coming back unintentionally, for example with feelings of powerlessness or believing you are not worthwhile. EMDR therapy can help you get rid of these complaints and feelings. At first, an EMDR therapist will ask you to activate the memory of this disturbing experience from your long-term memory. The memory is now stored in your short-term memory, also called the working memory. Then the EMDR therapist will ask you to focus on this horrible event. From there, the therapist will move his fingers in front of your eyes rapidly back and forth and ask you to track his fingers as best and as fast as you can. By keeping a traumatic memory in your mind and tracking the fingers of the therapist at the same time, the working memory gets to process a lot of information at the same time. As it is so much information, the image becomes blurred and loses its emotional charge. When the emotional charge of an image lessens, it also becomes easier to think differently about the experience. You will notice this because you feel less powerless or you feel worthwhile again. The intrusions have gone and you feel less anxious. You feel less depressed, you sleep better, and because you have managed to leave the experience behind you, you start enjoying life and looking forward to the future.
Yes, again, long-term memory. The memories are liable and there is a competition in the working memory of the patient, and then the memory is less vivid, less disturbing, and when it's less disturbing, patients can draw new conclusions about what happened. It's not my fault. It's his fault. And so you see the changes, what you see with EMDR therapy happening. According to this theory, it all fits. Yes, this is my part, and I think Sander will continue, but maybe you have questions.
Well, I can think about a lot of questions. You talked about the installation phase, and I want to ask you one question before we get to talk with Sander about like what are we doing with all that, because Sander developed this online platform that uses the working memory taxation hypothesis, and I had a chance to meet with Sander before, so we're going to show it, and we also have a special offer for all our EMDR learning community members at the end. But I want to ask you something. In the article, How Does EMDR Work? Vanderhout, from 2012, Vanderhout says, and I'm quoting, if associations relate to positive material, the data strongly suggests that simultaneous eye movements are counterproductive. Therapists may want to monitor the nature and valence of association or the associations and discontinue dual tasking when associations are hedonically positive. So what are we doing in the installation phase, phase 5 of EMDR? Why are we doing it? What are we doing there? Are we doing something wrong?
No, I think Marcel van der Hout was not a therapist and he didn't understand much about EMDR. He was a researcher. He is a researcher and he's retired now. At that time, he didn't understand EMDR so well. He did a lot of research, of course, but he was not a therapist, so he didn't even know what the installation phase was. So that's what you see often if you read literature and explanations about findings that the laboratory shows or a randomized clinical trial shows. If the therapist is not knowledgeable about the procedure, then it's not always correct what people saying at the time. That's 2012. We are more than 10 years further, and I don't think he will say that again. But yeah, you can see the desensitization phase and the installation phase as a way of processing. For the first phase, the desensitization phase, yeah, you ask a SUT, and when the SUT is 0, yeah, the patient say, hey, when I look at it, it's not disturbing anymore, but you can still process. And that's what we call the installation phase. So you need, if you want to continue with your eye movements process, you can't use the SUT anymore, because you can say, hey, it's -2 on a scale from 10 to 0 or something. So Vincent Shapiro was a very intelligent person. Say, we want to continue processing, but we can't, the SUT is not valid anymore. So let's continue with eye movements, but use another measure. So not only the SUT is 0, but we can, at the end, if we continue processing, even it feels much more true, the positive cognition. Hey, you've been bullied, and the SUT of that situation is 0. You still don't feel as I'm worthy or something. No, you still feel I'm worthless, or a little bit already less worthless. And then the therapist continue, and at the end of the installation phase, he asked again, hey, the SUT continued with processing. The SUT was already 0. When you look at a picture of your bullying, it's still 0, but hey, it feels like it's more valid, the idea that I'm not worthless, but maybe worthy. I'm an important person, and it was the other person that was nasty, and that's the unworthy person. So yes, that's what you normally see, is if the SUT declines, positive ideas, notions about the situation increase, and that's a normal process. And it's the process you don't see in EMDR only, but you also see it in exposure in therapy, prolonged exposure therapy. If you ask patients, when you do prolonged exposure therapy, you ask the same questions to patients as you would do with EMDR, you see the same process, but you don't ask for it. You don't ask for the associations when you do prolonged exposure. But if you would do, you see the same process. So that's how brain works. When you desensitize a memory, the notions about the situation, about the world, or about yourself get stronger in a positive way. And that's what Francine Shapiro predicted. It's a wound, it's healing, and you can't predict that it's going a bad way. It's always goes in the right direction. And that's the beneficial effects of EMDR, and it's called healing.
Yeah, that's great. I can think about many more questions, and we also have questions in the chat, but our time is limited. So first of all, Ad de Jongh, I want to thank you for joining the EMDR learning community and talking to us and educating us, and maybe we can do it again in the future and have more time for Q&A. So thank you, Ad.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Sander, let me make you a co-host. And now Sander and I are going to do a little demo of Moovd, that platform that was developed based on what we talked about in the last 40 minutes. And then we're going to have, at the end, we'll have a giveaway, and also every member of the EMDR learning community can get 45 days of free access to Moovd to experiment with that platform. So Tiffany, when you're ready, you can make Sander and I do the magic. I don't know. Do something.
I am already. So I'm sharing my screen now, right? Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yes. So yeah, thanks again, Ad, for this whole story about EMDR and the working memory theory. I think it adds quite nice up to what we're going to demonstrate now. Maybe do a small introduction on my side. My name is Sander Kamphuis. I'm the founder of Moovd. We are a Dutch startup, and we focus on developing tools for therapists to make their treatment more efficient and try to make it more effective. I think around 4 or 5 years ago, we met Ad already, and we had some great discussions about improving and developing technology for improving healthcare. And now, a few years later, we have built this EMDR platform that is completely based on the working memory theory, that is launched now a month ago in the US. So we're happy to give you all free accounts via Rotem. So that's really great. And for now, I think we're just gonna do a demonstration, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we've did is we've built this this web app, so a platform where you can just go to in the browser on your phone, iPad, or computer. It's called digital-emdr.com. And if you go to that website, you would see two options. So you can either be the client or you can either be the therapist. So for the demonstration, I will be the therapist, and the therapist needs to log in. So you need an account for this program, and you can all make a free account now in the link to also access the application. I'm going to log in, and then it will ask for a session ID. And the session ID is on the client side. So I'm going to demonstrate that as well. So the client can be somewhere else in the world because it's a tool for remote therapy, but it's also a tool for face-to-face therapy. And then in both cases, you as a client click, I'm a client, I'm now on the computer, and Rotem will also be on the computer. So he will press this one, accept it, and then the program would load. So Rotem, if you are ready, please go to the client side and tell me the session ID that's on the top of your screen.
Yes, I'm ready. I already done that. So my session ID is 13956124.
Great. So what we're doing right now is relaying the connection between my therapist side and the client side of Rotem. And what you can see now on screen is some sort of an admin panel. So this is your admin screen where you can have full control over the EMDR session and can control what's going on. It is completely built on the working memory theory. That means that the program can also be done on a small mobile device or iPad or computer, because what Ad showed is that the eye movements from left to right are not the main driver for the EMDR session. So we've built a system where you could access it on your phone, because we're going to give you all different sorts of tasks. So we're going to make you react on something. We can give you a visual task, which you have to follow with your eyes. We can also give you an audio task. So we have all these different options of taxing your working memory. And what is really interesting is that behind the program, there are some algorithms, and there's an AI that is detecting how high or low the working memory capacity of your client is. Because what we found out is that there's numerous levels or different variations of how high and low the working memory of a child can be, or an elderly, or for instance, some people that are gaming a lot can have a really high working memory capacity and can have a lot of tasks done at the same time. And Ad was saying, okay, you have to think about the memory, but you have to overstimulate the working memory while doing these tasks. So we found a way to make that as efficient as possible, to help you as a therapist to go to that optimal load. So what I'm going to ask is for Rotem to, because we are going to toggle on the visual task, and the only thing that I have to do as a clinician, I'm just starting my normal session, just as you used to be. But instead of doing this in front of a camera or using a different tool, you're going to press start task. And then there will be a ball moving into the screen on the client side. And the client has to press the arrow key down on his keyboard when it changes from the ball to the cylinder. Can you do that?
Oh yeah, let me switch over. I was looking at you. So I am,
Okay.
yeah.
Great, yeah, that's right. Okay, so Rotem has to click the arrow key down when the ball changes from the ball to the cylinder. And what you can see now in this slider is that it's going faster and faster because there's an AI behind it that's measuring and adapting the performance of an individual that is clicking. So it's becoming more and more difficult because the ball is going faster and faster because the tasks are performed quite good. So we're going to make it a bit harder, but also adding an audio task. And what the client then has to do is press the space bar. So you're pressing the arrow key down if you see the visual, and you're pressing the space bar when you hear a sound. So it's a visual task, it's an audio task, it's a clicking task. So we're combining all these tasks, and it makes it a lot harder. So we're hearing the task too. So left, right, arrow key down, space bar. And we can now see that it's still going on. That it's staying at 71, 73%. I'm going now ask Autumn to also tell me the color of the ball because it changes.
Green, blue, purple. It's really hard. Red.
It's really hard. Also ask him to do some calculations, as Art explained, or to do
Pink.
different tasks that are taxing.
Yellow.
So pause it. What was really interesting that this slider, the speed, it got stuck at 73, 77%. So somewhere here was in this moment the maximum of the working memory capacity that could cope with all the tasks. And you have to imagine that normally in an EMDR session, you also have to think about an image or a memory. So normally this slider, I think, would be somewhere here or somewhere here. But it's purely for the demonstration that we show that we try to intensify the working memory stimulation, and we do that for you. The only thing I did was press start task. That was it. Then it was moving for 2 minutes, and it was searching some sort of an optimal. And we, what is also really interesting is that we now submitted our first clinical study for publication that is now being reviewed on the whole story behind this algorithm. So that will be reviewed and published later. But we did another study that is available and also available through the community, I think, where we compared our tool to a traditional EMDR light bar setting. So it was a light bar control group for PTSD, and it was a control group that was using this app. And what we found was that because of this improved working memory taxation, the SUT dropped faster and also a bit further, but eventually faster. It took almost half the time for the tool, the digital tool, to get the SUT from beginning to the end. So from an 8.2, I think, up till below a 2. It took half the time of that same group that was doing it in a light bar. So it is working what we're building, and it is helping you as a therapist, as an EMDR therapist, to get really maximum out of your session. And because Ad also explained a bit about that in Psytrack and also in some different organizations, they're doing multiple images or events in a single session. Well, if you're using our app, in the recent study, it showed that it took half the time to clear an image. So that means that you can do 2 images in the same time. So that would improve your session outcome and make it much more efficient. So we are quite happy with what we're hearing from all of our users. I'm really happy to make it available for you all. And yeah, I would really invite you all to try it out, to try this out on a few clients, and also report back to us what you're experiencing with the app. I think in general, we get a lot of great results from all the American and Canadian people that are using it right now. It really enhances their therapeutic session, and we will be happy to be in contact with you and to show you more on the platform.
Sander, thank you. So I just there are some questions in the chat, so I want to address at least some of them. So can you talk a little bit about HIPAA compliance and client's confidentiality?
Yeah, it is completely HIPAA compliant, and client confidentiality is also pretty well organized by us, because we do not save any patient data. Because what you saw was that I just needed the session ID. So you're connecting a session ID with an app. We're not storing any personal information at all. So it's completely HIPAA compliant.
Okay. Patricia said, and I have to agree with that, I'm concerned clients might feel overwhelmed or get feeling of failing with the complexity of the task. So Patricia, I have to say that personally, I, maybe because of the fact that, I'm doing it in front of 100 people, it did feel a little bit like I'm failing because there's just a lot going on. But I think that if we provide enough education to our clients about the working memory taxation hypothesis and why we're doing what we're doing, that might help. What do you think, Sander?
Yeah, no, true. But it's also in some sort what Ad said, like EMDR 2.0, or it's becoming more of a competition between the therapist and the client. So try to do your best while thinking about the image would result in great results. And also, I think what you're seeing right here, this speed, I'm showing this to you as the viewers of the webinar. The client is not seeing this, of course. So the client is only seeing that ball that is moving from left to right. So this view, so here on the right side. So the only thing he sees or she sees is that ball going faster and faster. So I think we get that question a lot, but what you would get out of your clients probably is, hey, it becomes more fun, and can we do it again? And we have some great quotations from therapists that clients are loving doing an EMDR session. So that's quite rare.